Hi, friends. Welcome to reading. Today, the story that I'm going to be reading to you is Below Deck, a Titanic story. It's written by Tony Bradman and it's illustrated by Kevin Hopgood. We have 5 chapters in our story. I'm going to go all the way through chapter 3 today, and then we'll do 4 and 5 the following day. Chapter 1. The Titanic was the biggest thing Grace had ever seen in her life. She stood by the harbor with her Auntie Nora, the two of them looking up at it. "Well, this is where we'll have to say goodbye," said Auntie Nora. They were near the bottom of some stairs that had been placed against the side of the ship. Many people were climbing the stairs to an open doorway, an open door halfway up. Grace could see tears in Auntie Nora's eyes. This was hard for them. Auntie Nora was Grace's mother's big sister, and she had taken Grace in at the age of 5, after Grace's parents had died. She had been a mother to Grace, and they were very close. Auntie Nora was always worrying about Grace's future. That's why she had decided Grace should go to live in New York City with Uncle Patrick. "Things are much better over in America than here in old Ireland," Auntie Nora had said. "There's certainly more jobs. A clever girl like you will do just fine there." Grace had argued, of course. The thought of being sent to a different country, far away from Auntie Nora, was terrifying. But Auntie Nora wouldn't change her mind. She had written to Uncle Patrick, and he'd written back to say it was a grand idea. So here they were, a week later, in a place called Queenstown. They had come by train from Dublin so that Grace could board the ship that would take her away forever. There's Auntie Nora writing the letter to Uncle Patrick. Now, Grace's eyes were filling with tears too, and she hugged Auntie Nora tight. "Goodbye, Auntie," she whispered. "I won't forget you, I promise." "Nonsense," said Auntie Nora with a sad smile. "You won't give me a thought once you're on that ship, and so you shouldn't. It's a wonder, all right." "I don't care how amazing it is," said Grace. "I'll be thinking about you." But Grace had to admit she was a little excited about going on the ship. The Titanic had been built in Belfast, in the north of Ireland, and this was its first voyage. The whole world seemed to be talking about its size and speed, and how it would never sink, whatever happened. "Oh, Grace, you're a sweet girl," said Auntie Nora, kissing her. "You're too nice for your own good sometimes. Just take care of yourself." They parted at last, and Grace went up the stairs with everybody else. She turned at the top and waved to Auntie Nora in the crowd far below, and then she boarded the enormous ship. Chapter 2. A man in uniform checked Grace's ticket and told her how to get to her cabin. There were long hallways that all looked the same, a lot of staircases, and people everywhere. The ship had started its voyage in Southampton, England, and then picked up more passengers in France before coming to Queenstown, the final stop before New York. So let's think about that, friends, for just a minute. It started its voyage in Southampton, England, and then it picked up more passengers in France before coming to Queenstown. Remember, that's Ireland where Grace was, and that's where she caught the ship. And she's going to the final stop, which is New York. All right, let's hop back into the story. Auntie Nora had only been able to afford a third-class ticket for Grace. So her cabin room, F57, was at the bottom of the ship, where everything was cramped and there wasn't any fresh air. It took a long time to find it, but Grace opened the door to her cabin at last. The cabin had 6 bunks, that means bunk beds, 5 already occupied by a family. They seemed kind, but they spoke a different language, so Grace couldn't communicate with them. There was space under Grace's bunk for her suitcase. There wasn't much in it. Some clothes, a piece of paper with Uncle Patrick's address on it, and a photograph of Auntie Nora. Once she had settled in, Grace realized she was hungry and set off to find the third-class dining hall. The ship was even more amazing than she had imagined. There was just so much to see, so many decks and cabins and other rooms, and she soon got lost in the enormous maze of hallways and staircases. The second-class decks certainly seemed better than the third-class ones. Grace spotted a cabin with an open door and peered through as she went past. It was bigger than her own, and there were only 2 beds in it. They looked much more comfortable than the narrow metal bunk she would be sleeping in. Grace continued up the decks, curious to see more, but as she was about to go through a door, a man in uniform stopped her. He asked to see her ticket and said she wasn't allowed in the first-class area. Here we can see Grace peering in the door at the other room to see what it looked like. Grace was disappointed. Everyone back home had been talking about how grand the first-class decks were. It had been in all the newspapers, and now she wouldn't be able to see them. But as she turned down the hallway, she noticed a window that would give her a glimpse into the first-class dining hall. What a sight it was! The people inside were dressed in fine clothes and sitting at tables covered in spotless white linen. The silver knives and forks and the fine glasses gleamed like something from a fairy tale. 2 boys stood next to Grace and looked longingly through the window, too. She recognized them from the third-class decks. Eventually, one of them snuck in through the door, grabbed as much cake as he could from a cart, and then ran out again. Somebody at the table yelled, "Stop, thief!" and several stewards came bustling after the boys, but they were long gone. There's the boy with the cakes, and here's the steward running after him saying, "Stop." Chapter 3. "We'll never catch them," said one of the stewards. "I didn't even see their faces." Some passengers had come out of the dining room. A girl of Grace's age followed by a man and a woman. The girl pointed an accusing finger at Grace. "She knows those thieves," she said in an American accent. "They were together." Grace stood rooted to the spot, her cheeks burning. A steward grabbed Grace's arm. She tried to pull free, but his grip was too strong. "You better tell us where we can find your friends," he said, scowling at her. "I don't have a clue where they are," said Grace, "and they're not my friends." "You're lying." I'm sorry, "You're lying," said the girl. "You were standing right there with them." Grace turned to her, suddenly feeling uncomfortable in her patched dress and scuffed old shoes. The girl's clothing looked brand new and probably cost a fortune. "That will do, Catherine," the man said quietly. Grace realized he and the woman must be the girl's parents. He was tall and dark and wore a tailored suit and a bow tie. His wife was fair, and her sparkling dress seemed to be something a queen might wear. "Your father's right," said the girl's mother. "This is none of our business." "I was only trying to help," said the girl. "I mean, stealing is wrong." "Maybe they're hungry," said Grace, pointedly. Stealing was wrong, of course, but Grace hated the way this girl, Catherine, had interfered. She expected Catherine to snap something rude back at her now, but she didn't. She looked down instead, and Grace could see she was blushing. "Come along, Catherine," the girl's father said firmly, and they returned to their table in the dining room. The steward finally let go of Grace's arm. "Go away," he hissed at her, "and don't let me see you here again." He needn't worry, thought Grace. She'd already made up her mind to steer clear of the first-class areas from now on. By the time Grace went to bed that night, the great ship was well on its way across the Atlantic Ocean. Over the next 3 days, they were lucky with the weather. The sea was so calm it was like a mirror reflecting the bright April sky, and only a few people were seasick. Grace missed Auntie Nora terribly. But life on board was interesting, and she was excited about the future. There were people from almost every country in Europe in third class, and they all seemed to get along. On the fourth evening, some third-class passengers had a party. Grace went along and danced and sang with everybody else. It was late, and she felt tired, but she was having fun. And suddenly, there was a sharp bump that threw Grace off balance, followed by a strange scraping noise. Everyone stopped dancing and looked at each other. And friends, that's where we're going to stop. So I bet you can only guess and think about, right? If we think into the future, what do you think will happen next in this story? Especially based on all the background that you worked on before we hopped into the story today. All right, I'll join you tomorrow for the second half of the story.